when I accompanied my sister-in-law to meet her prospective match. The gentleman's family was more than satisfied. Only after the wedding did everyone realize a terrible mistake had been made. The groom had believed the woman he saw that night was me. But some things once done could not be undone. From then on, Lily resented me. Caleb avoided me and my husband Ethan and me for being too noticeable. I spent the rest of that life caught between them, all wrong no matter what I did, until sorrow finally wore me down. When I opened my eyes again, I was back. Before it all began, Lily Ward came running into my room, calling sweetly, "Nora, will you come with me tonight?" She meant the first meeting with Caleb Whitmore. I looked down at the embroidery hoop in my hands and shook my head. "No, you should go by yourself." Lily froze. "You're not coming with me?" I kept my eyes on the needle. "No." She hurried to my side, sat down, and looped her arm through mine. "But we already agreed. I'm an unmarried woman with no mother to guide me. How am I supposed to go alone?" I had heard the same words in my last life. People always said an elder sister-in-law should be like a mother. Since Lily's mother was gone, helping arrange her marriage had naturally become my duty. Besides, Lily and I had once been close. So in that life, I went with her. We stood beneath a bridge lit by lanterns, looking across the water at the man waiting on the other side. Lily took one glance and lowered her head, blushing. "He's so tall." I followed her gaze. But from that distance, I noticed only a long, upright silhouette. His face was unclear in the shifting light. "Does seem a little taller than your brother," I said. "Do you like him?" "I think he's coming down." Before I could finish, Lily's cheeks went scarlet. She grabbed my hand and fled. Afterward, the intermediary brought word the Whitmore heir had fallen in love. At first sight, it should have been a beautiful match. But 3 days after the wedding, Lily came home crying. On their wedding night, when Caleb lifted her veil, he had stared at her in shock and asked, "The woman that night was your sister?" Lily had been stunned for a moment before snapping, "That was my sister-in-law." Only then did I learn what had happened. Lily sobbed so hard she could barely speak. "Nora, I know it wasn't your fault. If you hadn't gone with me that day, how could he have mistaken you for me?" I gained nothing from that meeting. I lost my sister-in-law's affection. Instead, now in this life, I pulled the thread tight and said calmly, "Your brother dislikes it when I show my face too much in public." "Oh, so that's it." Lily smiled, with her usual open innocence. "Then I'll ask Ethan. He'll let you come." A familiar, gentle voice sounded behind us. Let her do what? Ethan Ward had returned. Why was he home so early? My heart jumped. The needle slipped and pricked my fingertip. A bead of blood appeared. I hid my hand, stood, and greeted him. "Ethan." Ethan looked at me quietly, his expression unreadable. Lily laughed behind her hand. "Nora has been married into our family for years. She still acts like she's afraid of you." My fingers curled tightly into my palm. Before I married Ethan Ward, I was only one of the many girls taken in and raised around his family. Strictly speaking, I was not his equal. My parents died of illness when I was young. I was sent to live with the Wards because Ethan's mother, Mrs. Margaret Ward, had been my mother's closest friend. I called her Aunt Margaret, though we were not related by blood. She pitied me deeply and treated me with great kindness. But kindness did not change my situation. I had no strong family behind me, no wealth of my own beyond a modest inheritance, and no parents to arrange my future. When people discussed my marriage prospects, I was always either too poor for good families or too well-raised for lesser ones. When Aunt Margaret fell gravely ill, she ignored the Ward family's objections and arranged for Ethan and me to marry. Back then, everyone said I was reaching too high. They pressured me to refuse him myself. When the news reached Ethan, he said, "Only my mother's wishes must be honored." So he accepted the arrangement. Because of that, everyone assumed he liked me. Only I knew he did not. Years earlier, Aunt Margaret had tried everything for me. Once she asked Ethan to introduce me to one of his classmates. Ethan Nora's background is a little thin. She said, "But she's such a pretty girl. If you introduce her around, perhaps someone suitable will take a liking to her." Ethan put down his book and slowly raised his eyes. He looked at me for a while. "She is pretty." I lowered my head, my cheeks burning, thinking he was complimenting me. Then his next words fell like cold water. "But beauty alone is not the foundation of a respectable marriage." Only later did I understand what he meant. For young men from old families, pretty woman without rank or influence was considered dangerous. She offered no advantage, and marrying her might make them seem shallow. Ethan had never wanted me. He married me in haste. No church wedding, no license filed at the county office, no grand reception, no relatives gathered as witnesses. The doors were closed. A simple dinner was served, and the Award family declared done. After we were married, he rarely brought me to social gatherings. After the mistake with Caleb in my previous life, he stopped allowing me to go out at all. I lived quietly, uselessly, timidly. Grief settled into my bones until it became illness. Before I died, my mind was hazy. I remembered the year a man had looked at me from afar and chosen me, believing I was an unmarried girl. It had been the only moment in my life when I felt wanted. Resentment rose in me like fire. I clutched Ethan's sleeve and said the cruelest thing I could think of. Ethan Ward, everyone said I was lucky to have you. But now I think that even without you, I might not have married badly at all. His face went white. Seeing that, I felt a strange satisfaction. Then I breathed my last. But when I opened my eyes again, Ethan was standing before me, and my chest felt tight. We are not afraid of each other, Ethan said lightly. We are simply polite. He sat down beside me, took my hand, and pressed a handkerchief against my injured finger. He had noticed the tiny wound. I stared at him, startled, and instinctively tried to pull my hand away. He held on. What were you discussing? Lily answered before I could speak. Ethan, I want Nora to accompany me when I meet the gentleman. It concerns my whole future. You'll agree, won't you? I waited for his reply. In my previous life, he had said go as casually as if it meant nothing. This time he said no. I froze. Ethan tightened his hold on my hand, his voice cool. If you want to go, go. Go alone. Don't take her. Lily stared at him. You want me to go alone? Ethan nodded calmly. If you bring her, are you sure he'll still be looking at you? Lily jumped up in outrage. Ethan, you're far too devoted to Nora. He's Caleb Whitmore, heir to the Whitmore family. Do you think he would be interested in a married woman? Ethan narrowed his eyes slightly. His breathing grew heavier. With men like that, who knows? My thoughts twisted into knots. He remembered. He absolutely remembered. He was guarding against Caleb. Ethan, you're being unreasonable. Lily protested. How can I go alone then? Don't go, Ethan said simply. The Whitmore family is too high above us. It isn't a suitable match. You. Lily was furious. Do you know how many families are desperate for a chance to meet him? It took so much effort to arrange even one distant look. What if he likes me? What if? Ethan gave a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. Perhaps he already liked someone. Lily misunderstood and blushed. Ethan, this is my future. Please let Nora come with me. Then Ethan turned to me. What do you say? I looked down at my embroidery. My fingertips brushed over the dense stitches. I won't go. I would rather avoid all unnecessary trouble. But Lily refused to give up. He argued and pleaded until at last. Ethan relented. For a moment, I wondered if I had been wrong. Perhaps he had not been reborn after all. Then he rose. I'll go with you. Those words hung in the air, a disruption of everything I knew. In my previous life, Ethan had stayed in the study, poring over ledgers until midnight. This Ethan, however, had practically forced his way into the chaperone role, his jaw set with a rigid determination that bordered on hostility. I picked up my embroidery hoop again, but my hands were trembling. The prick on my finger had stopped bleeding, leaving a tiny rust-colored stain on the white silk. I stared at it. He remembers. The thought should have brought a sense of solidarity, but instead, it terrified me. If Ethan remembered the bitter end of our past life, if he remembered the venom in my dying words, that even without him, I might not have married badly at all. Why was he acting like this? Why protect me from Caleb Whitmore's gaze? Why hold my hand and bleed his quiet desperation into my skin? I waited in the parlor, the grandfather clock ticking away the hours. The tea went cold. The fire burned down to ash. It was past 10 when I heard the carriage wheels crunch against the gravel drive. Footsteps hurried up the steps. The door flew open, and Lily burst into the foyer. She wasn't crying, but her face was flushed dark with humiliation, her shawl slipping off one shoulder. I have never, Lily hissed, tearing her gloves off finger by finger, been so insulted in all my life. I stood up, the hoop falling to the floor. Lily? What happened? Ethan stepped in behind her. He looked exhausted, the damp night air clinging to his wool coat, but when his eyes found mine, I saw a terrifying, profound relief. What happened? Lily echoed, her voice cracking. We stood on that miserable bridge for an hour, Nora. The wind was freezing, and when Caleb Whitmore finally arrived, he didn't even walk to the center. He stood at the edge of the water, looked at Ethan, looked at me, checked his pocket watch, and walked away. He didn't even speak to the intermediary. He just looked bored. She threw herself onto the velvet settee, burying her face in her hands. He didn't even look closely enough to see my face. Ethan was right. He is arrogant and unbearable. My heart hammered against my ribs. In a last life, Lily and I had stood in the exact same spot. Caleb had seen my silhouette in the lantern light, mistaken me for Lily, and instantly declared his intention to marry her. Without me there, without that trick of the light and the fatal silhouette, the love at first sight simply hadn't occurred. Ethan had dismantled the tragedy before it even began. Go upstairs, Lily, Ethan said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority. The Whitmore family is not for us. You will see that in time. For once, Lily didn't argue. She gathered her skirts and fled up the stairs, leaving Ethan and me alone in the dimly lit foyer. He slowly unbuttoned his coat and handed it to the maid who had hurried in. Once we were alone again, he turned to me. The space between us felt charged, thick with the weight of 2 lifetimes. "It is done," he said softly. "You went out of your way to ruin her chances," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "I went out of my way," Ethan said, taking a step closer, "to save her life. And yours." I retreated a step, my back hitting the edge of the parlor doorway. "Don't pretend you did this for me, Ethan. You made it perfectly clear how little you think of me. A woman without rank, a dangerous prospect. Isn't that what you told Aunt Margaret?" Ethan stopped. The blood drained from his face, leaving him pale as marble. For a long moment, he just looked at me, the mask of the stoic, indifferent husband cracking, splintering right before my eyes. "You heard that," he whispered. "It wasn't a question. I heard everything," I said, the bitterness of my past life rising like bile in my throat. "I know you didn't want me. I know you only married me because she begged you on her deathbed. You locked me away in this house, gave me no wedding, no dignity. And then, when I finally died, I told you the truth. I could have had a life." Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them, the raw agony in them made me flinch. "Nora," he said, his voice breaking. He closed the distance between us, and I was too stunned to move away. He didn't touch me, but he stood so close I could feel the heat radiating from him. "Do you truly believe I hid you away out of shame? What else was I supposed to think?" I shot back, tears finally spilling over my lashes. "You never took me to society dinners. You never introduced me as your wife to your peers. When Caleb realized his mistake and the gossip started, you shut me in entirely, because they would have devoured you." Ethan's voice rose, echoing off the high ceilings, startling us both. He dragged a hand through his dark hair, entirely abandoning his usual composure. "My God, Nora, do you know what men like Caleb Whitmore are? Do you know what the city's elite do to women who have no powerful family to shield them?" He looked down at me, his chest heaving. "When my mother suggested I introduce you to my classmates, she didn't understand the cruelty of those boys. They saw beauty without backing as an invitation for ruin. I told her beauty wasn't the foundation of a respectable marriage, because I knew they would never offer you a respectable marriage. They would have offered you mistress's quarters. They would have toyed with you and thrown you away." I stared at him, the breath knocked out of my lungs. "So, you married me. In secret." "I married you," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh, desperate whisper, "because it was the only way to make you untouchable. I didn't give you a grand wedding because the moment I paraded you in front of the Whitmores and the rest of them, you would have become a target. I wanted you safe. I wanted you mine. I didn't know how to be a husband. I was so terrified of failing you that I suffocated you instead." The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at the man I had spent a lifetime fearing, a lifetime resenting, and saw only a man who had loved me in a language I hadn't known how to translate. "And when you died," Ethan continued, a tear finally escaping his eye and tracking down his sharp cheekbone, "and told me you would have been better off without me. It broke me. I lived another 40 years in that life, Nora. 40 years in an empty house, paying for the sin of not loving you loud enough." He slowly reached out, his fingers trembling, and gently cupped my jaw. "When I woke up this morning, and it was 5 years ago, I swore to God I would tear the world apart before I let you feel unloved again. And I would burn Caleb Whitmore to the ground before I let him look at you." I squeezed my eyes shut, leaning into his palm. The resentment that had settled deep in my bones, the grief that had killed me in my past life, it began to fracture. "You should have told me," I sobbed, my hands coming up to grip his wrists. "You left me in the dark, Ethan. I thought I was worthless." "I know." He pulled me against his chest, burying his face in my hair, his arms wrapped around me like a vice, as if he feared the universe would snatch me back to the grave. "I know, my love. I am so sorry. I am so damn sorry." The shift in our marriage did not happen overnight. The wounds of a lifetime, even a past one, required time to heal. But Ethan was a man reborn in more ways than one. He no longer locked himself in his study. He ate every meal with me. When Lily babbled about dresses and gossip, he made a point to ask my opinion, to defer to me as the lady of the house. He fired the housekeeper who had always treated me with veiled condescension and handed the keys to the estate directly to me. But the true test came 3 months later. The annual autumn gala hosted by the governor was the event of the season. In my past life, Ethan had gone alone. This time, a week before the event, a velvet box was delivered to my room. Inside was a necklace of breathtaking sapphires, and beneath it, a gown of midnight blue silk. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching me touch the fabric. "There will be no more hiding," he said softly. "I will not make the same mistake twice. You are my wife. I want the whole world to know it." On the night of the gala, I walked into the grand ballroom with my hand resting on Ethan's arm. The moment we stepped through the gilded doors, a hush fell over the immediate crowd. I felt the weight of 100 stares. The whispered questions rippled through the room. "Who is she? Ward's wife. He has a wife? I stiffened, the old insecurities flaring up. But Ethan placed his hand over mine, his thumb stroking my knuckles. He stood tall, his posture projecting an absolute, lethal pride. Let them look, he murmured in my ear. They are looking at the most beautiful woman in the room, and she belongs to no one but herself and by grace to me. We moved through the crowd. Ethan introduced me to senators, to merchant princes, to old money matriarchs. He didn't apologize for my lack of pedigree. He weaponized my presence, presenting me with such reverence that society had no choice but to follow his lead and treat me like royalty. And then the crowd parted. Standing by the champagne fountain, holding a crystal flute, was Caleb Whitmore. He was as striking as I remembered. Tall, aristocratic, with sharp features and eyes that always seemed to be calculating the value of everything they saw. Caleb's gaze drifted lazily over the crowd, and then it snagged on me. I felt a cold chill wash over my spine. Even in the bright light of a ballroom, without the lantern light, without the bridge, without Lily, his reaction was the same. His posture straightened, the glass in his hand lowered. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach turn. It wasn't a mistake of the dark. The terrifying realization hit me. Caleb Whitmore was a predator, and I was exactly the kind of prey he preferred. Quiet, beautiful, seemingly delicate. In my past life, he hadn't fallen in love with me. He had wanted to consume me. And when he found out I was married to Ethan, he had delighted in trying to destroy Ethan to get to me. Caleb began to walk toward us. Ethan felt my tension. He shifted slightly, placing himself half between me and Caleb, a human shield in a tailored tuxedo. Ward, Caleb said as he approached, his voice smooth as oiled silk. I don't believe we've crossed paths in a while. And you brought a guest. My wife, Ethan said, his voice dropping to a register so cold it could have frozen wine. Nora Ward. Caleb's smile didn't reach his eyes. He extended a hand toward me. A pleasure, Mrs. Ward. I must confess, I didn't know Ethan was married. He's kept you a tragic secret. I didn't take his hand. I looked at Caleb Whitmore, remembering the tears Lily had shed, the way he had casually ruined her reputation, the way he had driven me to an early grave with the scandal he brought to our door. I didn't feel flattered by his attention anymore. I felt revulsion. Some treasures, I said, my voice ringing clear and steady over the music, are simply not for public consumption, Mr. Whitmore. Ethan values our privacy. As do I. Caleb's hand dropped. A flicker of genuine surprise crossed his face, followed by a dark, intrigued amusement. Well spoken, though it is a pity to hide such light under a bushel. Perhaps we will see more of you in society now. Perhaps, Ethan said, stepping fully in front of me now. Enjoy your evening, Whitmore. Keep your distance from my table. It was a blatant dismissal. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he gave a mock bow and melted back into the crowd. When we were seated at our table, Ethan poured me a glass of water. His hand was shaking slightly. He looked at you, Ethan said quietly, staring at the tablecloth. Even without the bridge, he looked at you the exact same way. I reached across the table and took Ethan's hand. I wove my fingers through his, ignoring the gasps of the society matrons at the public display of affection. Let him look, I said, repeating his words from earlier. I caught Ethan's eyes, making sure he saw the absolute truth in mine. In the last life, I was foolish. I thought a man looking at me from afar was the only time I was wanted. I didn't know the difference between a man who wanted to possess me and a man who wanted to protect me. Ethan exhaled a shaky breath, his grip tightening on my fingers. He cannot touch me, Ethan, I promised him, because I don't want him. I never did. I only ever wanted my husband. The aftermath of the gala changed the trajectory of our lives. Caleb Whitmore, bruised by my public rejection and intrigued by the challenge, attempted to make his move. He started aggressively buying out the supply chains for Ethan's textile mills. It was the same tactic he had used in the past life to drive the Ward family into bankruptcy, forcing Ethan to the brink of ruin while Caleb played the wealthy savior, offering me a way out. But this time, things were different. Ethan wasn't fighting alone. Because I'd been locked away in the previous life, I had spent hours listening to the servants' gossip, reading the newspapers, and secretly reviewing Ethan's discarded ledgers out of sheer boredom. I remembered the market crash that was coming. I remembered which banks would fail and which shipping routes Caleb relied heavily upon. One evening, as Ethan sat in the study rubbing his temples over a ledger, I walked in and placed a map on his desk. Sell the Northern Mills, I said. Ethan looked up, startled. Nora? If I sell the Northern Mills, Whitmore will buy them instantly. He'll monopolize the rail lines. Let him, I said, leaning over the desk. In exactly 2 months, the workers on the Northern Rail line are going to strike. It will last for half a year. The mills there will be paralyzed, and anyone holding that debt will bleed dry. Sell them to Caleb through a proxy. Let him drown in it. Ethan stared at me, his eyes wide. He didn't ask how I knew. He just looked at the map, then at me, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. You, he murmured, pulling me by the waist until I was sitting on the edge of his desk, are a terrifying woman, Mrs. Ward. I'm a woman with a score to settle, I replied, running my hands through his hair. He ruined my sister-in-law in the last life. He ruined us. I'm not going to sit by the window, and so while he tries to do it again, Ethan pulled me down into a kiss. It was fierce, hungry, and full of the desperate passion he had hidden from me for an entire lifetime. We executed the plan flawlessly. Ethan quietly liquidated his vulnerable assets and shifted his wealth into southern maritime shipping, a sector I knew would boom. Caleb, blinded by arrogance and his obsession with crushing Ethan, bought every northern mill the Wards abandoned. 3 months later, winter set in. The northern rail workers went on strike, protesting brutal conditions. Caleb's supply chains froze. His factory stopped. The debts piled up overnight. I saw Caleb one last time outside the First National Bank. He looked haggard, the aristocratic arrogance replaced by frantic, hollow panic. He saw me stepping out of my carriage, swathed in a heavy fur coat, Ethan's hand at the small of my back. Caleb stopped in his tracks. He looked at us, at the undisputed unity between us, at the quiet triumph in Ethan's eyes, and finally, at the cold, untouchable indifference in mine. He realized, in that moment, that he had been outplayed, not just in business, but in fate. He lowered his head, turned up his collar against the snow, and walked away into obscurity. A year after the day I woke up in my second life, I stood in front of a mirror in the master bedroom. Lily walked in, carrying a veil of fine lace. She had grown up immensely in the past year. After witnessing Caleb's rapid fall from grace and the vicious reality of society, her naive obsession with romance had matured into a pragmatic, grounded wisdom. She was currently being courted by a young doctor, a kind, quiet man who looked at her with genuine respect, not as a prize to be won. Are you ready? Lily asked, smiling softly as she pinned the veil into my hair. I looked at my reflection. I wasn't wearing a heavy, ostentatious gown. I wore a simple, elegant dress of white silk. I am, I said. When I walked downstairs, the house was filled with flowers. There were no hundreds of guests, no sneering society matrons, no calculating peers. Just the servants who had become family, Lily, her doctor, and at the end of the aisle in the sunlit conservatory, Ethan. He wore a dark suit, and as I walked toward him, I saw tears shimmering in his eyes. He didn't give me a grand wedding in our first life out of fear. Today, he was giving me this wedding out of devotion, a vow renewal, to replace the hasty, closed-door dinner of our youth with a celebration of the love we had fought through death to find. I took his hands. They were warm, strong, and entirely mine. I, Ethan Ward, he said, his voice trembling but clear, take you, Nora, in this life and in any life that follows. To protect you, to honor you, and to never, ever let you doubt that you are my entire world. I smiled, a tear slipping down my cheek, washing away the last ghost of the bitter woman who had died in that cold room so long ago. And I, Nora, I whispered, holding his gaze, choose you, not out of duty, not out of lack of options, but because my soul knew yours, even when the lights were out. When he kissed me, the applause of our small family echoed through the bright room. The winter sun spilled through the glass ceiling, melting the frost on the panes. The past was finally dead, buried beneath the snow. And our life, our real life, had just begun.